Okay, welcome everyone to another show of Natural Niche and the Alternative Guy. Again, we have a special guest, a very prominent historian that's been around a long time. We've had him on other shows, and he's a very dear friend, a person that we've done many shows in the past when we were both living in Atlanta. So we're together again, and this particular show is going to be a very exciting show. It's going to be called A Comprehensive View of the Black Family in America, Its Origin and Its Development. So again, I would like to welcome you to our show, Brother Muhammad. Can you, for those that haven't heard or seen one of our shows before, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Muhammad Ali Salaam, and I am a graduate of Lincoln University in Missouri, where I studied under Dr. Lorenzo Green, who was a protege of Carter G. Woodson, who assisted him in the development of the Black History Week, which later evolved into the Black History Month. And I majored in Black Studies under Dr. Lorenzo Green, and I went on to the University of Missouri in Kansas City to do graduate work in what was called Third World History, Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East.
Okay, again, our topic is a comprehensive view of the Black family in America, its origin and its development. So in light of that topic, Brother Muhammad, can you preface this with a definition of family as a social unit?
Yes, the family, as we know, it was Walbank and Taylor in their book, The Civilization Past and Present, where they outlined those 6 elements that are common to all civilizations and culture. And one of them, of course, was family. That in all civilizations and culture, the family is the nucleus of the society. It is the basic social unit of society. In Western civilization or culture, when we think of family life, we're usually prefacing the nuclear family, which is composed of husband or father or wife, mother, and children. That definition in the context of the evolution of the Black family in America is a bit, because as you know, our introduction into the United States or colonial America was one of slavery, chattel slavery, in which the slave master saw the effectiveness of maintaining an orderly slave society by demising or trying to destroy the family. In the family, as you know, and what they were trying to eliminate is those feelings of compassion, love, and the obligation, the natural obligation and duty that's felt to protection. So as the Black family evolved in these circumstances, you can kind of look at the experience as first beginning in disorganization, because coming from Africa, from various tribes, from various countries in Africa, and many of the slaves did not speak the same language, and you have to wonder how were they able to even mold themselves in any kind of social context by which they could interact with each other outside of the intentions of the slave master, as any human being does. We might seek to oppress and to eliminate things in the human being, but there are certain things that are innate to all human beings and that you cannot destroy. They might internalize these feelings and develop another system. And this is what the slaves did themselves. They carved out their own means of family, although scholars say that family life was destroyed in slavery. But I take the position that it wasn't destroyed, it just took on another form. And this is why when we look at the black family, we cannot view the black family and the history of the black family in the context of the Eurocentric definition and view of the black family. And again, most scholars who deal with the black family usually preface their study from the writings of E. Fraser Franklin, the black sociologist, and the white Jewish anthropologist Melville Hersowitz, and Professor Lorenzo Dow Turner. Now, Fraser wrote the book, The Black Family in America, in 1939. But between 1941 and 1943, the three of these scholars who went on to become the fathers of the Black Studies movement in America, Hersowitz at Northwestern University, Lorenzo Dow Turner at Fisk University, and E. Franklin Fraser at Howard University.
Okay, so was all of these scholars, were they all African Americans or?
No. Dr. Lorenzo Dow Turner, who was the first black linguist, and E. Fraser Franklin were black, and they were very close friends. But the anthropologist, Melville Hersowitz, was a white Jew. And they met in Salvador, Bahia, Brazil, which has the largest black population in Brazil. And their undertaking was to determine what influenced the evolution of the black family in the diaspora. But Dr. Fraser's emphasis was more on the black family in America. But all of them were concerned about the black family in America. Dr. Fraser held that the black family was shaped as a result of blacks' reaction and response to slavery, and that it was mostly slavery and adaptation to oppression that shaped the black family. Hersowitz felt that it was the transition of African culture within black America that helped it survive, and some of the things that they brought from Africa that they transmitted in America that enabled them to survive. And Dr. Turner, as a linguist, who was a distinguished scholar who had studied the Gullah language, he was more concerned with the language patterns of black America to find out were there preservations, particularly of the Gullah language, among the slaves in the diaspora that had survived. Although Fraser and Turner were very good friends, Turner took the position of host of it. But Dr. Fraser held to the position that the black family was formed by the experience in America, that black evolved their own unique way of surviving as a social unit and what became a family on the plantation. although the whites were trying to destroy the family. But he was saying that it was still a family. You cannot say that it was not a family. And under the various circumstances that we have gone through during slavery and after slavery, up to the Great Migration, that we continue to synthesize our environment and our various circumstances to mold what he defined as a family, though it distinguished itself from that European, Eurocentric. Now, Dr. Fraser has been scorned and punished by many scholars who held that Franklin was coming from a maternalistic point of view, and that he was holding to the concept that the black family was weak because it was matriarchal, and that he was saying that slavery is what made us into a matriarchal family, and that he was blaming the black woman for the demise and for the decline of the black family. But other scholars have said that a careful reading of Dr. Fraser will show that that was not his position, that he actually upheld the black woman, and that had it not been for her in these circumstances, that we probably would have lost that concept of bounding. And despite what she went through and the adjustments she made to carry the black race forward, when the black man was always in a disadvantaged situation, because it is a fact that historically whites have always tried to dismiss the black man from the black family. But Hersabit was saying that many patterns of the black family in America were preservation from African culture, and that when you examine African culture, you would find that many of them had a matriarchal base to it. And that does not mean that a family is weak, because the nucleus of that family is the matriarch, or the matriarch. And that was a preservation from African culture. Now, Fraser and Dr. Turner agreed with Hersabit, but Turner's interest mostly was in language patterns, and by seeking out language patterns that survived slavery, he was naturally accommodating Hersabit with the preservation of African culture that survived the Atlantic slave trade and the experience of slavery in America. But on a modern tip, when we see Daniel Patrick Moynihan in 1965, and the Moynihan report to President Lyndon Johnson. He was an Undersecretary of State under Lyndon Johnson, and he's the one that wrote the famous address that Lyndon Johnson gave at the Howard University commencement in 1965. Well, Johnson admitted to what the American experience had done unjustly to black people. And he pointed out that the greatest sin that America had done was the demise of the black family. And at the nucleus of that, he saw was how it had treated the black man, how it had taken away the black man's sense of self-esteem and honor, because he had lost his ability to provide for and protect his family. And that if the black race in America was to be restored, that we must do something to restore the honor, the integrity, and the esteem of the black man. So in that address, Johnson was saying that the black man must be given priority in employment so that he can be the center of his family. Now, as we know, at the height of the black movement of the 60s, the women liberation movement, or the feminist movement, became prominent. And many of these white feminists came in and attacked Moynihan and said that Moynihan was nothing but a reincarnation of what Dr. E. Franklin Fraser had been saying in the 30s and the 40s, that the weakness of the black family was that the black male should be restored to dominance in the black family. But they were projected in a sense of a male chauvinistic perspective. And these were more or less white women. And if you see the scholarly work that was done and is being done on the black family, most of it now is being done by white scholars. And the black family, in fact, has been studied and is being studied more than any other family in the United States. For what reason, we have to but wonder. And they kind of gave a wrong interpretation, deliberately, I must say, in my opinion, to the work of Dr. E. Fraser Franklin. And to a large extent in the world of academia, Dr. Franklin went down with the image of one who was opposed to women's rights. But when we think of women's rights and the writings of Dr. Fraser was more concerned with the rise, the continuity of the black race. And he did not separate the gender thing. He didn't make it an issue. He saw ourselves as male and female, both working together to stabilize the black family. And even Dr. Fraser, he even acknowledged that, particularly after the Great Migration, when we saw some families were headed by single households, and we know Moynihan seriously attacked this issue and said that it was the basic issue. He said you can pass civil rights law, and the civil rights law had been passed. The voting rights had been passed. He said despite that, the black race would continue to decline unless something is done to restore the black male to the center of the black family. That might have some, and I'm sure it does, have some credibility to it. But he came out a bit harsh in his projection of the black female as the fault. And I think this is a mistake that is being made today.
So Brother Muhammad, let me ask you this. So then with this whole thing about Moynihan condemning the black female, so what was going on within the African American community at that time that caused them to be so concerned about trying to uplift the African American community, being that this was during Johnson's term? What was going on within the black community at that time?
Well, this was at the height of the civil rights movement, because we know it was under Johnson that the civil rights bill was passed. And some have interpreted that it wasn't Moynihan that actually condemned the black woman, but it was the white feminist movement that exploited the argument of Moynihan and of Dr. Fraser. Moynihan, I think, as others interpreted, Moynihan and Fraser was just arguing that the black family was so weak because the black male was so weak, and because he wasn't the cornerstone of his family, is that he was not able, that this society deliberately attacked his ability to provide for and to protect his family. And that until you restore him to that position by which he could provide for his family, then that the black family would remain weak. I don't think this was a view of black women. I think you can't see black women and black men as being diametrically opposed to each other. But I think the white feminist movement injected this as a means of dividing the black race or down gender lines. And I think that you see much of this today. To a degree, they were successful. If you see the dilemma between black males and black females. But as Stokely Carmichael, quoting Touré, said, any analysis of the oppressed that omit the oppressor is a false analysis. So what was wrong with black people was not the black man nor the black woman, but the oppression that they were subjected to by both black, white men and white women. And our response to that, but we were moving as a united unit, as a unit of a race of people. We didn't see ourselves as divided. But the feminist movement tried to divide us down gender lines, and to a degree, it was successful. So many interpret Moynihan's prediction of 1965 as having come true, because 70 years ago, black people came from, the majority of black children came from a two-parent household. Today, 70% of black children come from a one-parent household. So that is not necessarily our doing. That is the doing of this system of white supremacy that we have been subjected to. And us trying to adjust to that and doing the best that we could under those circumstances.
Okay, yeah, so then I guess the problem that we have had as a people is basically allowing other people outside of our communities to define our reality for us.
That's true.
Okay.
That's true.
Okay, so what we're gonna do? We're gonna move on to the next question, and we'll just move on to the next question. But I definitely appreciate that analysis there. Discuss the movement of more than 6 million blacks from the rural South to the North, Midwest, and West between the early 1900s to around 1970, and what became known as the Great Migration.
Okay.
So let's just you can continue to talk about the Great Migration from the South to the North, the Midwest, and the West between the early 1900s to around 1970.
Oh, okay. Well, as we know, with the Great Migration that began in the early 1900s, this occurred during the period of industrialization in the North, and it was somewhat simultaneous with World War I, in which they were curtailing immigration from Europe because now you're fighting a European power. So the Northern industrialists needed the labor in the South, and blacks was running from the oppression in the South. So now this represents the urbanization of black America. This is another transition on the part of the black family. It is kind of like starting over, but it's also because we were somewhat made into a new people with this urban migration. We were not accustomed to the urban life. But nonetheless, you're talking about 6 million people getting up from the south and migrating to the north in the urban areas. And the impact that had upon family life, who are people who were 50 or less years removed from chattel slavery, and how the family transitioned into that those circumstances, and meeting a very hostile environment in the north, the Irish oppression against black. And so we see that how black people, again, very cleverly and very geniusly molded themselves together and kept their families together. And at a time in which black women were working outside the home, black men trying to find work outside the home. But nonetheless, they had family life. Some of these families were of the nuclear nature, but some of them were not. But we cannot condemn this, what we're talking about today, when we condemn single-parent household. That is nonetheless a family. And under the kind of circumstances in which we have lived, we must ease up on our judgment of black people, because you're going to have those circumstances. But you have to remember that black people, all the way from slavery, they accepted each other. They're saying it takes a village to raise a child. The black family was viewed not so much as two people and their children. The black family was viewed as the entire race. And we took care of each other. The idea of the extended family is basically what we were. We took care of each other. And this is how we adjusted to that great migration into the north.
Well, Brother Muhammad, I remember my grandfather and some of his brothers moved to New Jersey from Virginia, from the south. And then some of their children moved to the north, and some of his children stayed in the south. So this was within my lifetime. I remember that process taking place, where some of the ones in the north, my grandfather, his brothers, and some of his children were living in New Jersey, and some of them was living in Virginia. And I remember them coming back and forth. So they kept that family cohesiveness, even though some of them had moved from the north to the south. So I remember that within my lifetime.
And this is how the norms in the South and the customs in the South, and how we had learned, set a pattern as to how we are to exist in America, were laid in the South, because there was constantly an interchange between the Southern black and the Northern black, or the urban black, and those who remain in the rural areas. So we were an extended family, and you have to give our people credit for navigating this very difficult experience in America, and how we were able to go north, establish business even, and do what was necessary. You even see the great movements that came out of this great migration, the Marcus Garvey movement, and even later on, the Nation of Islam and many other, the fraternities and the churches. Those institutions were not like they are today. All of our institutions were institutions that served the needs of black people, where the greater society was ignoring us. So our people navigated these circumstances, and they looked out for the family. young couples and young families, and we kept moving, we kept going. But what kept us together, what glued us together, was that sense of, as Coach said, they made us into a race, and we made ourselves into a people. And this is what kept us going. And Booker T. Washington was talking about that sense of peoplehood is what kept us going. Some might refer to it as nationalism, but I prefer the word peoplehood. And some people call those people and those leaders back there the race people, the race leaders. We had an identity with each other, a bond with each other. And that is what kept the black family going. But it was very different than how the white intellectuals tried to define the black family in the context of the Eurocentric view. You cannot take the black family and put it in the perspective of white scholars and how they define. Usually the reason why they study it so much is they're trying to whoop up on it and pointing out its weaknesses of it. But they don't see what we see. And when we start blinding ourselves to what we were doing as a people and start taking their view of us, taking their narrative, then this is what threw us off course. Because again, Montague's report and the feminists trying to correlate him with E. Fraser Franklin when it wasn't the same argument. And many scholars, as you see, Mayhan, which pretended that he was a friend of black people when he was in the Johnson administration, he jumped ships and joined the Nixon administration and Nixon's war on crime and began to indict us as criminals. So you really can't trust these people. You have to look at what we were doing and stop being so quick to indict black people. Because when you have a problem, the best person at solving that problem is yourself. And if you ignore yourself and your own solution, you will never find the solution, because the solution to a problem is within the problem, not outside of it.
Wow, that's good. Yeah, so given this ability to survive throughout these quite cruel social realities, does the modern family appear to have lost its way? And if so, solutions can you provide to perhaps put it back on course? This will be our last, we're going to wrap it up with that, you giving us that solution. What do you think is a good solution?
I think that the problem is that, as I said earlier, is that the feminist movement, the white female feminist movement, moved in on the black movement of the 1960s and began to indict the black male and to try to separate the black male and the black female. And I think that since that time, by accepting their narrative, I think that we are somewhat in a gender warfare, and we cannot win that way. And they have been trying to sell this issue that the black woman is at the root to the weakness of the black family. And many black males, unfortunately, accept that reality. When black people didn't make that kind of distinction prior to the white female feminist perspective and the scholarship that is going on now. You look into the scholarship now on the black family, the white female feminists still have seized upon the issue and is dominating the issue. So we have to jump outside of their narrative. The blacks of old did not accept that narrative because they understood that these people did not have our best interest. We have to start accepting our own, ourselves, and the narratives that have been given to us by those who have preceded us. if we are going to continue as a people and maintaining the black family. And again, we cannot define it the same way that white people define the family, because there are some realities in play with us historically that does not fit the white narrative.
So let me ask you this then. So do we want to make it clear that the white family, does it appear to be the shining example of how family's supposed to be?
Oh, not at all. Not at all.
Because it seemed like we're always basing everything on them, and then they're always setting the narrative of how things supposed to be. So, in light of what you just said about we have to redefine all of these things and continue to draw on our own narratives. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
They are not the example. That was the whole point. They are not the example. And from a historical perspective, they have always been the enemy of the black family. And again, I don't see why they are so preoccupied, their scholars, in paying so much attention to the black family. We cannot accept their reality because we have a different reality. And we cannot accept their narrative. The problem facing the blacks today is that we are too quick to take other people's perspective of us instead of defining ourselves. And we're not even considering what is best for us as a people anymore. And we are just living aimlessly, many of us. But we have to take on this responsibility of looking at our people again as a sense of peoplehood and remaking ourselves as a people, if there's any hope for us.
Okay, brother. I definitely appreciate your views on that beautiful topic that we came up with, the comprehensive view of the black family in America, its origin and its development, because we're constantly developing. And I think when we get to the point where we stop developing, then it's over then. But we've been able to make all of these shifts and deal with all of this cruel challenges that we've been confronted with, and we're still here. So
yes.
So
if we came this far, if we've come this far with all these roadblocks, we
Right.
can continue to go forward. But we must get some clarity and begin to trust our own selves. I agree with. I like the analysis you gave.
okay, so we're gonna end with that, and I want to thank you once again, and you continue. Are you working on any works in centered around this information? Are you working? Are you writing anything in this arena?
Yes, I'm working on the black family, and I didn't mention to the listening orders that I am the author of the book, A Black Man's Journey in America, where I chronicle my own family history. And that book by E. Franklin Fraser, he prefaced that book on the history of my own family. If you read that book.
And your family name was it
My family name was Carmichael.
Carmichael?
But as a slave, they had no name.
Right.
So it was Mike and Phoebe. And Mike and Phoebe were slaves in South Carolina. And they belonged to different plantations. So Phoebe was sold to the new state, Alabama, in 1820. Alabama became a state in 1819 after Eli Whitney had invented the cotton gin in 1793, I believe. And Mike had to stay in South Carolina. But he promised Phoebe that he would find some way to come to her and the children. And so he finally worked out a deal with his master in South Carolina by which he could work for his master by day and work for himself by night to buy his freedom. And a price of $1,900 was agreed upon. And he worked day and night. And it took him 5 years. He probably would have achieved it earlier, but the Denmark Vesey rebellion occurred between that time. And so that perhaps slowed him up. But in 1825, he paid for his freedom, and he set out to Alabama in search of his freedom, his family. But going from South Carolina, he had to pass through the slave state of Georgia, go through the slave state of Alabama. And at any time, any white person could re-enslave him. So he had to be a very innovative person. And he finally found his family of Alabama. And from there began our family. And I'm of the 6th generation of that family. Spike Lee is of the 5th generation of that family.
Right. Wow. Well, brother, you have an interesting family history. So we're gonna wrap this show up with that. And again, I want to thank you, and we'll be contacting you again for more insightful shows. All right. Peace.
Peace to you, brother.